Welcome and thank you all for joining us, joining Startup Cleveland and Cleveland Community College for our first Entrepreneur Roundtable. We're so glad you could join us. Very quickly, my name is Stephanie Kissel. I'm the co-founder of Supportedly and your cruise director for this roundtable event. We're packing a lot into our time together and are excited to have several key members of our local startup ecosystem, the president of Cleveland Community College, Dr. Hurst, as well as one of our key statewide ecosystem supporters, who I'll introduce in a few. Before we get started, a few words about Startup Cleveland. Startup Cleveland is an online business portal that helps local entrepreneurs, that's you, start and grow their businesses. The program was developed in partnership with Supportedly and Cleveland Community College. Startup Cleveland's resource-rich website empowers entrepreneurs and small businesses to succeed by quickly and easily connecting them with support programs, essential business training, and each other. That's all of us. So if you haven't already, we invite you to check out more at startupclevelandcounty.com. Our first speaker has worked with community colleges for over 25 years and has served as president of 2 other institutions. Now, as the president of Cleveland Community College, he believes community colleges everywhere are the key to economic development in their regions. Here to tell us a little bit more about Startup Cleveland and its role in the startup community is Dr. Jason Hurst. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Hurst.
Thank you all for joining us today, and we're so excited about Startup Cleveland and what that means for not only Cleveland Community College, but Cleveland County and all of the folks out there who are looking to learn more about starting their own companies. And you know, when I've been at Cleveland Community College almost 3 years now, and one of the things that I noticed right away is that there really seemed to be a disconnect between the Small Business Center, Cleveland Community College, and how much local entrepreneurs knew about the connection with the Small Business Center and Cleveland Community College. I really do feel like that Startup Cleveland is a great way to combine those resources, and so that anyone looking to start a business or to grow a business can go to one site and find out information. I mean, this Startup Cleveland really does a great job at answering questions. It provides tips. It really is a spotlight for entrepreneurs to tell their success stories with people that we've worked with in the past. It talks and speaks much about training opportunities. And I'm so excited about what Startup Cleveland does for our college, our community, and our small business center. When you think about Cleveland Community College and what we are here for, we are here specifically to meet the needs of our local business and industry partners. And also, when you think about entrepreneurs, we're here to meet your needs as well. And we want to provide all the resources we possibly can to meet the needs, answer your questions, and the Small Business Center through Startup Cleveland can do that for you. Small business centers provide a variety of educational resources, from small business webinars to seminars to information on taxes, and many things in between. And Startup Cleveland is just a great resource for anyone out there looking to start a business or to grow a business. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hurst. Our next speaker I'm very happy to introduce is one of our roundtable panelists in our keynote today. Thom Ruhe is an entrepreneur, investor, mentor, and president and CEO of NC Idea. Thom works with entrepreneurs, governments, and NGOs around the world to embrace the entrepreneurial mindset. His passion for supporting ecosystems throughout the state of North Carolina is inspiring, and we're thrilled to have him here today. Thom.
Thanks, Stephanie. Appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and try to share my screen. Hopefully I'm fairly competent 8 months into this COVID experience to do so. Thank you for that warm introduction, and per Stephanie's comments, I just want to share over the next couple minutes sort of a state of entrepreneurship, if you will, and kind of get a glimpse of what maybe some priorities for 2021 should be. Before we do that, however, I think it would be nice, just for the sake of everybody watching, to share what NCIDA is, specifically the fact that we are an independent private foundation, what is known as a 501c3. And our mission really is to help people realize their full entrepreneurial potential. You know, we have a philosophy that entrepreneurship is a very effective tool at economic empowerment, and we exist basically to help people realize that benefit. So what does that look like programmatically? We maintain a strategic portfolio of grants and programs. I differentiate because there are some foundations will do nothing but manage programs. Some will do nothing but write, grants. We actually do a strategic combination of both. And it's just my opinion that, doing a little bit of both informs us and makes us better at the other. In total, since we've started in 2005, we have granted, these numbers are always dated. By the time I make the slide, it's already over 11.5 million. Matter of fact, we're going to be adding 2 million to that number just this year. But of the companies that we have helped along the way, they have combined, created over 3,000 jobs. Many of them have gone on the private equity route and raised several $100 million worth of capital. 16 have been acquired, and 65% are still in business. Of the organizations that I have the good fortune to be affiliated with, one of them is the Keenan Institute of Private Enterprise at UNC Chapel Hill, where I serve on the board. And we are very fortunate in the state of North Carolina to have such a renowned think tank because they are producing world-class research, and a report that they just recently in September issued, where the 7 Forces Reshaping the Economy report, where they basically took stock of 7 large macro trends that, whether it's COVID or just, other socioeconomic conditions, are reshaping how we do things. And here's the list of them. I'm only going to speak to a couple of them, but the changes in work, travel, and other patterns, that's a big one. And that's a big one that we actually can leverage in the state of North Carolina, having such a rich inventory, so to speak, of options that we can afford to entrepreneurs and workers, so people that are going to work at these startups. Another one that's pretty big and on everybody's mind is this renewed focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, dismantling systemic racism. For us, that has manifest this year in the announcement of the North Carolina Black Entrepreneurship Council, where we have formed a council of 25 leaders in the Black entrepreneurship community. We've funded it with $500,000 to start, and we're going to be doing very specific programming targeted exclusively for Black founders. There's more detail on all these. I cannot recommend highly enough this report if you're kind of interested in what's happening at the macro level. But back to that changing in worker trends, which was the first point of the report, I just want to share a clever example, right? So with so many companies being willing to work in a distributed workforce, and I can even share a personal data point on this. My 2 oldest children that are in their mid-20s work for the same venture-backed company in the cybersecurity space. And they've already been told by management that they will not be returning to an office. The earliest they'll be returning to an office would be 2022. So through all out of next year. So the point is that they want to allow employees to have the flexibility to live in any part of the country that they want, save for a few rules, like you have to still abide by the time zone. They do insist if you're going to move to a different state that you have great internet connectivity. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But here in the case of Tulsa, with the remote Tulsa effort, they were offering these grants of $10,000. And the whole idea here, right, is bring these knowledge workers, which are not your minimum wage jobs, right? These are the higher tax wage jobs, and then get them to fall in love with the area. And the reason I use this example in a talk like this is because as I think about the rural communities in particular of North Carolina, there is such a quality of life sales point to make for these communities that it's this kind of out of the box thinking that, you know, I think we need to apply in certain of our communities, or rural communities in particular in the state of North Carolina, so that we can bring in the workforce of the future, right? Because this is what is at stake. And this is why you're seeing these really novel programs that I think are going to have an impact. I know their first cohort already was so successful that they've started their second cohort of doing this. So where do we stack up in entrepreneurship? Startup Genome is a global organization that tracks ecosystems on several topics. And I'm happy to say that North Carolina is one of only 2 states that in the emerging ecosystem category, we actually had 3 territories in the top 100. I'm sure this is not a surprise to anybody that, you know, the 3 that they are, Research Triangle, Charlotte, and Wilmington, the coastal region, that frankly, that's actually very promising that came up and hit the top 100, because a year earlier that would not have made the list. So my message when I'm talking about entrepreneurship in North Carolina statewide is to really see these 3 hub areas as exactly that, a hub where we have concentration, but to encourage other communities to find the connective tissue you can to some of these hubs. You know, entrepreneurs are not quaint, you know, local activity. It's not that kind of a secluded effort. I'm struggling for the right way to characterize that. What I'm trying to say is it's very mobile, right? And we have so many resources in the state of North Carolina. My encouragement to you, the entrepreneurs out there in the audience, is, you know, be aware of the many assets that are in the state at your disposal. Yeah, you may have to drive a few counties over, but they're there. And as somebody who's done ecosystem building on a national and global level, I can tell you firsthand that we have a wonderful, wonderful inventory of world-class resources. And my biggest frustration is that the entrepreneurial community writ large is just simply unaware of all the assets that we have. But that gets manifest in these national and global rankings, as we see here with Startup Genome. Another interesting point that came from the Venture Forward effort by GoDaddy. GoDaddy is the big internet registrar that many of you may be familiar with, but they have an exceptional database of over 20 million micro ventures, you know, small businesses, startups, side hustle, as some people would refer to them. And they had some very interesting findings after doing and speaking to many, many, many of their clients. And these are, you know, this is nuts and bolts. Like, there's nothing super surprising or sexy about these 4 main points. But it's good to know, because, you know, hopefully other people that pay attention to this are our policy, you know, makers. The people, you know, apparently something political happened this week. I don't know what specifically people are talking about it. I should be careful to be sarcastic on Zoom. It may not translate. Of course, I'm aware that we had a little election. And if I had a message to the outcome and the people that have been privileged by the citizens to serve them, is I'd ask them to pay attention to the data, right? I mean, this is what we tell our entrepreneurs. Do your, you know, customer research, know what your constituents want and need. And in the case of encouraging and nurturing entrepreneurship, you know, there are some just easy, low-hanging fruit, you know, access to capital and skills and training. Broadband on this list is the one that I want to just really hit hard on, because broadband is that one thing when people ask me from, you know, our vantage point of the work we do and what we get to see, like what's holding things back, how could we accelerate more economic activity? Broadband adoption is probably the simplest, biggest thing we can do. And right now, North Carolina is in the middle of the stack. We're 25th, 26th on average broadband speed and access points. And in particular, if you're looking at trying to activate more rural communities, you know, right now, if I were as a serial entrepreneur, somebody who started and sold multiple companies, and now I'm thinking like, hey, I don't want to live in the urban area. I want to go to a beautiful community, buy 40 acres and do something so I can start my next adventure. If I don't have broadband, if I don't have access to broadband, it's simply not an option. So the communities that, have been successful at bringing high-speed internet, they at least are in the fight, right? And those that don't, the communities that can't even offer that, they're not even, whatever sports metaphor I can torture here, they're not even in the ballpark, right? Let alone at the plate trying to swing at a ball. And to me, that's not a big enough urgency in the state than it should be. But I think I've made my point. So what else has been happening now specific to, COVID and how the economy has taken, well, I would say a hit, but in the last 48 hours, it's, at least the stock market, if we're going to use that as one index, is reacting in a curious way. But here's the other curious thing. And this just came out, October 10th edition of The Economist, but apparently new firm formation is booming again in the US. And there's still plenty of people that are trying to figure out the whys. One of the things I read was that some of this could be just simply a result of the stimulus money and the PPP money, and a lot of it maybe out of necessity. So if you lost your job out of necessity, you started something new. But on average, historical data shows that we lose about 500,000 startups per year. So you'd like to have the baseline, and when I say startups, we lose 500,000 nascent firms. That would be companies 5 years old or younger. And when the baseline starting in the country is at 500,000 or higher, we see aggregate growth on the net. So if you have the 500 go out, but you have at least 500 start, and hopefully more, on a net basis, you keep growing. For the last turnaround, or last downturn we had in 2008, we were well below 500,000. We were floating in the 400,000s, which meant that we had more companies ceasing operations than were starting. And so that's always, I'd like to say that's your proverbial canary in the coal mine as to what the early stage startup ecosystem is going to look like nationally speaking. And that's the reason that is so important is that startup firms less than 5 years old, create all net new job growth in this country. And so think about that from an economic development practitioner standpoint. How many people talk about creating new jobs. Your large corporate citizens, which, we love them, they're great. They produce that baseline economic activity, but especially the publicly traded ones, they have, pressure to be more productive, meaning produce more things with less people, right? Startups, they don't have anything yet. They, by nature of starting something, they have to hire people. So that's why we need to focus on startups as this benchmark metric when it comes to doing effective economic development, which is why, again, we focus on entrepreneurship. But there's data there that's encouraging for the moment. I'm going to be very curious to watch this unpack over the next several months to see if it is just an anomaly or a trend that has some legs, some sustaining force behind it. So I would be remiss, I need to wrap up here in a moment, but I'd be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to pitch another big event, our own. And since we're all close personal friends here, I'm going to share with you, although not publicly, a code that if you wish to attend our Startup Ecosystem Summit, it's statewide, virtual. There's the dates, it's November 16th and 17th. And if you use the code TRUHE, TRUHE 20, you'll get a free pass. That is a $75 value. One of the things I've learned in doing this virtual stuff is one advantage to it over a physical event is that it is a fixed sunk cost. So there is no incremental additional expense if we have 10,000 people show up versus 100 people. So if you want to see more about what we talked about today, plus hear from some national and statewide thought leaders. We have the CEO of the Kauffman Foundation speaking. We have Scott Hamilton, in charge of Golden Leaf, the president of Golden Leaf Foundation, and many other folks. So I would encourage you to check it out. And I would just like to remind everybody that our greatest natural resource is the entrepreneurial potential of our people. You know, why do we focus on entrepreneurship? It's because collectively, if we can unleash the potential that everyone has to be entrepreneurial, to do things in the startup community, we will get more from it than anything we can harvest from the sun or the wind or dig up from the ground. And that's why, you know, we focus on that. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Thom, and thank you for that code. We are looking forward to that summit very much. It's time for the interactive portion of our event, our roundtable. We're very lucky to have joining us today several members of our startup community here in Cleveland County. So I'm going to take a moment to go around the table and introduce the members of our roundtable. And if you would, members, please just go ahead and wave, give us a wave, raise your hand when I introduce you. So first we have Stephen Padgett, our Small Business Center Director here at Cleveland Community College. Hello, Steve. And Dr. Robbie Freeman, founder of Freeman Family Chiropractic. Brandon McKee, founder of McKee Services. Thom Ruhe, my business partner and co-founder of Supportedly. Hi, Thom. And of course, Thom Ruhe, President and CEO of NC Idea. And Dr. Jason Hurst, President of Cleveland Community College. Some of the questions that we have today are very commonly asked questions that we hear often from entrepreneurs. Panelists, while I might direct some of these to your specific panelist members, please feel free to jump in with your thoughts as well. We want this to be as interactive as possible. And to our audience, feel free to add your questions to the Q&A and we'll speak to those as well. If your question is directed to a specific panelist, please let us know in the Q&A. So let's kick it off first with, I'd love to hear from Steve. Steve, do you have any practical examples of how the Small Business Center can help me as an entrepreneur?
I have one major example, and that is the status of Cleveland County leadership in business. 5 years ago, we started a program called a Certified Entrepreneurial Community Program, and I visited all 15 municipalities. I met with the county commissioners and explained the program, which was to identify and make available as many resources as we could to help a small business startup or to help an existing business grow and get larger. I'm happy to say that 100% of those communities agreed to this process and made a financial contribution to pay the bill, as did the county commissioners. And we've had a lot of support since then. So we have done some preliminary resource identification as of now, but there are other things that we can do. What these resources do is provide any kind of information, not necessarily just Cleveland County focused. We have resources reaching from Asheville to Charlotte that can provide information. And that's what we try to do. I kind of tell the same every client that comes in, the same thing. I do not have all the answers, but I'll certainly help you find them. One example I want to share with you that is one of my favorite entrepreneurial stories. A gentleman came in my office about 4 years ago and he had a piece of wood with a hole in it. Said, I want to start a new business. I said, okay, what are you doing now? He said, oh, I teach school, but I've been kind of getting tired of that. I want to start my business. I said, what is that thing? He said, oh, that's a new game I just came up with. He said, I want to call it, you're familiar with the big game of cornhole where you throw the little bag of beans at the big hole. Well, this is a game called coin hole. He came up with this idea, and not only did he make the idea of the boards into where he could get certified with the colleges and businesses and all around the community, he came up with the idea that maybe somebody else would want to buy these. So he got a contract with Hasbro Toys nationwide. He sells these in Walmart and Targets and everywhere now. But the thing that's the beautiful part of this is on the back of it, at the label, it says made in Lattimore, North Carolina. Lattimore is a town of about 180 or maybe 200 people. His little wood shop out behind his house is where these are made. He only has 4 or 5 full-time employees, but during the peak season, which is coming on, and he told me last week he's already started hiring temporary workers, and during the Christmas peak season of gift giving, he hires about 25 to 35 part-time people just to meet the demand for orders. That is one of my favorite success stories of a smart startup entrepreneur.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Steve. And I will definitely be picking up a couple of those this Christmas season as well. That's a fantastic thing to do while we're all, indoors during the colder months for sure. Do you have, as a follow-up, do you have any specific advice, just thinking about his situation or other entrepreneurs, if you were giving that piece of advice of that entrepreneur coming and sitting down in your office, what is a common piece of advice that you find that you're giving?
What I try to do is explain to people that there are certain steps they should be taking before they start investing their money. Unfortunately, a lot of folks go ahead and spend the money and then find out maybe that was not such a good idea. For example, I had a lady call me several years ago, wanted to know if I could come up to her business. And I said, certainly. I went up to talk with her and she said, see the sign out front? I just got it in there last week. I said, this is a nice looking sign. She said, yeah, the city just told me I can't use it. I have to throw it away. And I spent $700 buying that sign. Can you help me? I said, no, ma'am, I'm sorry. I wish I'd have known this first and I could have saved you the trouble because the city has a sign ordinance. I just wish I'd have gotten to you first. Those are the kind of things that I would hope that people starting a business would know. Ask the questions up front before you spend the money.
Yeah, a lot of discovery and a lot of advice, and I know that's what you're there for at the Small Business Center for sure. Thank you for that, Steve. I was meant to tease Thom Ruhe about his hair today, but I would be remiss if I didn't point out that both of our Toms on the call are wearing matching outfits. So I've chosen to go that route. And tease the two of you, so I get a 2-for-1 there. So I actually would like to direct this question to Mr. Thom Ruhe. You are in the grant making business, and I know there may not be any secrets to receiving an NCIDEA grant, but could you tell us a little bit about what advice would you give entrepreneurs who are looking at the grants that you offer or grants in general, and maybe drawing on real wins that you've seen in the past or even mistakes that have been made? What advice would you give to entrepreneurs that are seeking grants?
Well, I'm going to plagiarize or draft off of Steve's comment because he had said, I wish this entrepreneur had approached first and done the homework to understand, right? It's a similar answer, but more from a customer discovery standpoint. So there's, Steve was alluding to the regulatory side of, getting incorporated and setting up shop, and that's all great advice. But when you apply for a grant, right, first of all, understand that we have 2 grant programs for entrepreneurs. One is called the micro, that's $10,000 grants, and one's the seed grant, which are $50,000 grants. And those are true grants. It's free money. So it's not a debt instrument. You don't give us equity in your company. So you can imagine if you're giving away free money, right, there's a little bit of competition for that. So it's a competitive process that we go through twice a year. We have a fall and a spring cycle. And if there was a common characteristic of applications that don't generally prevail well or succeed, it's ones that just go off of whole assumptions that the applicant, the founder, has done very little customer discovery on. And so imagine, if you will, 20, 30, 40 people, each cycle, our core review team's around, 50. I believe Thom has been actually one of our core reviewers in the past, as a matter of fact. Everybody brings their own bias. So when you say in your application, like, I've invented this, and I'll stick with Steve's example, the coin hole person, right? And you've done no customer validation, you've done no interviews, you haven't taken a beta product out there and tried to sell it in the market, but you're just darn sure, right, this thing is going to be wildly successful. It's very hard to get excited about that and to be competitive, in the face of 150 other applicants, where somebody's got, a beta product out there, they've got some early sales. They also, more importantly, have some really harsh feedback, right? That has helped evolve the product, because all those assumptions you had very early on, only some of them were right and others were very, very wrong. So that's kind of one of the secrets, that if you're going to be competitive, then you have to demonstrate that you've done customer discovery. It's such a big issue that one of the other programs we offer to entrepreneurs, it's not financial, but it's assistance and it's educational, it's labs. And that's, 4-week program where we help founders do kind of the validation of their idea and test the viability of the idea and the potential of the company. And all 4 weeks is exclusively focused on customer discovery, because that's the only opinion that matters, right? So demonstrating that is a big way to help improve your odds. And then understanding other world circumstances. Case in point, we're in the midst of COVID, right? Our fall cycle, which we're going to announce next week at our summit, we're going to announce the winners live, who's winning the $50,000 grants. But some of them applied, right before COVID turned everything cattywampus. And, now you have to look at that, and let's say your business was in the travel and leisure space, for example. Sorry, we can't ignore the fact, right, that we're in COVID right now. And if that idea was great pre-COVID, that's wonderful. And hopefully you'll get another bite at that apple, on the other side of COVID. But you have to be situationally aware and understand that and demonstrate an ability to adapt to the uncertainty of markets.
And I want to take just a little bit of a step back to and revisit the idea of customer discovery for those everyday entrepreneurs that are out there watching this and hearing that term customer discovery. Can you, Thom, or any other panel members, feel free to jump in and just help us define what is that customer discovery, and what are those first couple steps that entrepreneurs can take to really engage in customer discovery?
It's talking to people. I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, Stephanie, because it's one of those terms we use inside. That's our inside baseball vernacular. But what it really means is just talking to people, and not being afraid, realizing this is not a 900-pound phone, right? It's pretty easy to hold up. You just have to have the courage to call and talk or get in front of somebody and listen. And what I say when we talk about that to entrepreneurs is be aware and take with a grain of salt things that are flattering, things that you hear and you feel, oh, that's great news, right? So if your spouse is telling you great things about your idea, or your mom is telling you great things about your idea, or people that are friendly to you, it's cotton candy, it tastes good, but it's going to probably rot your teeth out. Welcome the negative feedback. People that are willing to be honest with you and harsh in their feedback are doing you a favor. And, listen for that kind of feedback, because there's nuggets of gold in there that will help you, make the changes and pivot, take a different direction if you need to.
Stephanie, if I may add one thing to Thom's comment about talking, I would like to add walking, because I had one client that came in 3 or 4 years ago and said that she and her boyfriend wanted to open a restaurant. I said, do you know how many restaurants there are where you're going? Oh yeah, but we've done our market research. And a lot of times people do not do market research. I said, where'd you do your research? Oh, we've been to Charlotte. We spent 6 months walking around Charlotte, visiting these kinds of businesses. And we're going to put in a little different kind of restaurant here in Shelby. It's not going to be like everybody else. And by the way, here is our business plan, a 3-ring binder full of business plan information. Never seen one before and haven't seen one since. Most successful restaurant ever opened in Shelby. Really, they were prepared. They'd done their homework, and the talking and walking paid off.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that, Thom and Steve, for sure. Robbie and Brandon, I'd like to turn over to our entrepreneurs in the room to get some advice and feedback from you as well. This one's either for Robbie or Brandon, whoever wants to jump in on this. How did you use the Small Business Center to grow your business?
I'll go ahead and jump in. I'll be quick, Brandon, though, so that you can answer as well. Initially, I heard about the Small Business Center, set up a time to chat with Steve, sat across the table from him. And I think the scary thing to me was he started asking me questions. Like, I don't need questions, I need answers. And so, but to use his wisdom and experience to help me, he provided a sounding board initially, I think was the biggest thing for me. It wasn't initially about solutions. It was a sounding board for, this is what I'm wanting to do. This is what I'm wanting to provide my community. And then we sit down with the numbers and what are you looking at charging? What are you looking at making? How many people are going to take this? Those kinds of things. But to have that initial connection with somebody that wanted to invest in my success enough to ask me the questions, where I am and what I'm hoping for. That was my initial thing with him. And then just, I've kept contact with him once in a while with my questions to him to get answers.
Brandon, what about you?
Well, I kind of came into Steve as a little bit when I was trying to expand my business. And I say expansion, I was part-time business owner and I still worked a full-time job. And so I was moving from that, being a part-time business owner to making it a full-time business owner when I came across Steve. And he gave me a lot of good information. But one thing I really took away from it was that I really wish I had met him in the beginning, and because he could have saved me a lot of time and a lot of effort. He really had things organized as far as the information that I needed. And some of the questions that he had asked me, a lot of the things I had already taken care of because I had been doing it on a part-time basis for so long. But I realized that, man, if I would have contacted him several years ago, there's a lot of mishaps that I could have avoided, a lot of information that I could have went to one source and found out what I needed. But he also helped me a little bit with the expansion and kind of moving it from part-time to full-time. But one thing I really took away from it was I really wish I had contacted him in the beginning because it was such a very organized and a great resource.
Awesome. So what I'm definitely hearing is get to the Small Business Center sooner rather than later, for sure. And thank you so much for that, Brandon and Robbie. And as a follow-up to both of you, is there any advice you'd have either for working with the Small Business Center, working with Steve, or even preparing for going to the Small Business Center and sitting down with Steve?
I think Steve has the questions to get you started. I think if you're kind of coming in fresh, there's probably going to be several meetings with Steve involved, and it's probably going to start with a lot of questions from him as far as where you stand. And then some things that you'll probably want to go out and do, like research on your customers and, some of the things that's already been discussed, along with things that he brought up to me was business structure and insurance and things like that, which I think are definitely very important things that are sometimes overlooked. So I think that, get there, but it's probably going to involve several meetings to get you to where you need to be, unless you're like the company Steve mentioned that came in with a 3-ring binder and had already done their homework. But most of us entrepreneurs are involved in a trade or already involved in another business. And we may be great at that particular trade or that sector of business, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're prepared for the business side of things. So I think that going in with Steve is a good starting point, and he can direct you down the road and the information that you need to be pursuing and finding out.
Wonderful. Anything you want to add to that, Robbie?
And I think kind of piggybacking a little bit off of Brandon, and this may may answer future questions too. But I think, well, have you ever lost your train of thought? That's what just happened to me. I think for me, I was confident in my role as a chiropractor. I knew that I could provide chiropractic care to people. What I wasn't as confident with was me as a business owner. And I think talking with Steve helped me understand that confidence as a chiropractor does not always translate to being a successful business person. It's sometimes hard for me to think of myself as an entrepreneur being somebody who provides a service, a health-based service, as opposed to a tangible product. But to have that confidence, and I'm great at what I do. I can provide chiropractic care, but can I run a business? And so I think Steve's one of the guys that can sit down with you and say, yes, you can, but here are some things you're going to have to change. These are some things you're going to have to address. You're going to have to look at the numbers. You can't just be a good fit for somebody who's seeking your care. You have to look at your numbers. You have to follow the data. You have to know what your customers, the customers that you're wanting to attract, what are they looking for? So I think that was a takeaway for me, that it's one thing to be good at what you do. It could be something completely different to be good at running the business side of that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And my next question is, again, it's for both of you, Robbie and Brandon. You're in my hot seat right now. This is one of my favorite questions to ask all entrepreneurs. So I will push this out to both of you. What is a piece of advice that you would give to any entrepreneur starting out?
I'll jump in on this one, and this is a scary answer, but don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to make that mistake. And I still am. I'm in my fourth year of practice, and I'm still scared of saying the wrong thing. I'm still scared of throwing a Facebook ad out there or a comment on my page and it drawing negative feedback. It might have been Thom Ruhe a few minutes ago said, welcome the negative feedback, because that actually is going to be building a building process for you. It can be as or more constructive than destructive if we let it be. So I think don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to make the mistakes.
I love that one. Thank you. How about you, Brandon?
One thing that kind of worked out for me that I encourage people is finances. I mean, we're all doing business to make money, and money's how we live and provide for our families. So one thing that I did, and one thing I would encourage people to do, is business can be risky. Getting your personal finances in order. And the reason I say that is just because I think it gives you a little bit of freedom on your decision making. You can make a decision based on what's best for your business long term, rather than what may give you a paycheck at the end of the week. So I would say, your debt to income and taking care of any issues you may have. Because if you really want to build a successful business, there may be times where you don't get paid what you're used to getting paid on a weekly basis. So I think I see it more as a way of changing your focus to long-term success in the business, rather than having your focus being, I need X amount of dollars at the end of the week, and I've got to make a decision that provides that. Because there's times that where, I think in a new business, the money's not necessarily there, or it's there, but you see a business opportunity that you would like to invest in, and it's kind of either, well, I'll pay myself this week, or I'll grow the business this week. So that's one piece of advice that I've given people in the past.
That's excellent advice for sure. And a perfect segue over into another category that is often talked about, which is finances and funding. So the next question I have is for Thom Ruhe. Thom, I would love to know, what are some common business funding options available to entrepreneurs?
Thanks, Steph. Yeah, that's a great question. It's one that we get all the time too, because I think as Thom Ruhe pointed out, with the startup, or that was the GoDaddy research, that's one of the biggest hurdles. To Brandon's point, a lot of times the first answer is yourself. So this notion of self-funding for entrepreneurs to be able to do enough of use enough of their own finances to be able to get to a point where they can do that basic customer discovery and be able to figure out if there's a real good business case or the beginnings of a business case to move forward and take a little bit more risk. So self-funding is the first option there. I love what Brandon said. I think that really requires that you get your own house in order financially. If possible, being able to use your own savings. A lot of times, unfortunately, first-time entrepreneurs will look to debt in the form of credit cards, which is pretty easy and fast to get. And then, as several folks have said, there is this, kind of hope that is the underpinning of a lot of the activity. So entrepreneurs are pursuing this dream, and there's a lot of hope and emotion behind it. So that tends to rack up a lot of expenses pretty quickly. Other options would be, taking a look at your savings, taking a look at maybe selling some of the things that you don't need any longer, that you may not be using, then use that to take, small baby steps to advance your business idea forward. Beyond that, we've got the NC IDEA represented here with Mr. Thom Ruhe, and grant programs, any type of free money that's available. NC IDEA with their seed grant is a great option, but you also have a lot of other grant options. And with Startup Cleveland County, we have a full directory that can make that process easier for folks to go in there and find what kind of money programs are out there, and are they close to them, and do they qualify? So obviously taking advantage of free money. And then beyond that, you get to kind of the friends and family, or the I love you money category. So with that, that's generally the first outside money beyond grants that you as an entrepreneur would look to bring in. And that can be structured a million different ways. Being able to go to your family members, your friends, close acquaintances, and put together some type of a deal that would allow you to get some capital. I could tell you story after story about my own personal journey in doing that, and some awkward holiday dinners when things don't work out. So there's a lot of things to consider there. And then beyond that, of course, you can get into debt financing through the SBA if that's available to you. And then you get into outside investor capital, like angel investors, venture capital firms. I'm fortunate to be a general partner of an angel investment fund. We make investments all the time. And that's a very different ballgame, and it's for different types of companies. The good news is that we've got a great training that's free at startupclevelandcounty.com on the basics of business funding, and it addresses a lot of these things that I've pointed out here. So I'd encourage everyone to take a look at that.
Steph, can I add something?
Yes, please. Thank you, Thom.
I just wanted to point out everything that Thom just said is great and on point, but all capital is not necessarily financial. And what I mean by that is it's access to people, it's access to resources. And I would just want to take a moment to congratulate Dr. Hurst for investing in this, Startup Cleveland County resource, because it's, the community college is one of those resources that I think is greatly under leveraged and underappreciated in our economy. But I'm always fond of saying you could drop into any part of the country where you've never been. If you want to know what's happening in that community, find the president of the local community college that serves it, and they will tell you who the largest employers are. They'll know what the vocational demands are of the workforce, and all of the resource partners like the SBTDCs and other programs that support the nascent entrepreneurial ecosystem there. So leverage the resources you have. It's as good as financial capital. It's just another form of it. And so often what's holding you back is not necessarily dollars, it's access. And you've got that at the community college. So I cannot recommend strongly enough that people take advantage of that resource.
Thank you so much, Thom. Absolutely. Thanks for saying that. And that actually is a great transition. We've got a couple of questions from the audience that I really want to get to. But first, I wanted to ask Dr. Hurst, why do communities like Cleveland County need to continue to invest in supporting entrepreneurs and small businesses?
Thank you, Stephanie. And Thom, thank you for those kind comments. We need to hire you for our next commercial. Very well said. Thank you. You know, I currently chair the local economic development board, and have chaired that for a couple of years. And you know, what gets a lot of attention are the smokestacks and the large companies that come into a region. And you know, and even we can all get caught up in that, in the excitement of you know, big press releases from the governor's office when we land a big company. But quite frankly, when you look around the country, somewhere around 80% of the companies across our nation have 20 or fewer employees. And so we are a great nation made up of small businesses. Small businesses are really where the rubber meets the road, and employs the vast number of people across the country. And so we have a vested interest as a community college and as a county to firmly invest in companies and small businesses specifically, and in helping entrepreneurs be successful.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Hurst. I really appreciate that. We have several questions that are coming in from our audience members, and they are largely directed. We want to hear more from Robbie and Brandon, it looks like, from our entrepreneurs. So these questions are directed at Robbie and Brandon, and of course, I encourage the rest of the panel to jump in as well. One of the questions we have is, and I love this one, is when did you know you wanted to be an entrepreneur and own your own business? At what point? Or, you know, another way to ask that might be, what made you decide to be an entrepreneur? And I will kick that, I'm going to kick that over to Brandon.
All right. You know, off the top of my head, I really kind of, in high school, you know, I worked for small businesses when I was in high school, and I kind of observed, you know, the people that I worked for, and they seemed to have a little bit of freedom, and they seemed to be kind of just in general in the position that I wanted to be in. So it just became an interest of mine, and I didn't really know what I was going to do, and I didn't know if I was ever going to be able to do it, but it just started being something in the back of my mind that it just seemed like looking at them from the outside, that was kind of the life that I wanted to have. It was something that I was kind of interested in and passionate about. And at one point in high school, I went to I think I was maybe 17. I went to some type of summer camp at Western Carolina University for young people interested in entrepreneurship. And then after high school and college, I was working for a small business, and it was just something always interested me. I kind of looked at the people above me, the people I was working for, and kind of admired what they had accomplished. And you know, I like the challenges that come along with it. And, you know, and there's, I would say that there's a little more freedom. You know, I'm not just generally working day to day to clock an hour and get paid for that hour. I get to look at things kind of in the long term. And when I'm successful, I get to take a big part of ownership in that success. And it's rewarding for me. And that's kind of what I always saw it from the outside, as it just seemed rewarding. So it's I'm not doing things a whole lot different than I was doing when I was working for somebody else, other than I'm in a slightly different position. But you know, all the risk is on me, all the reward is also on me, and that's a little bit of stress. But at the same time, I enjoy a little bit of stress. It kind of keeps me motivated and gets me moving on a daily basis, you know, and it adds a little bit of purpose to my career versus just kind of punching a clock and you know, working for the hourly wage every day.
Absolutely. And I have another question. I want to get through a few questions, and thank you so much for that, Brandon. And So Robbie, for you, you are in healthcare. So this question's being asked quite a bit, just related to the pandemic and challenges that you might be seeing. What are some changes you're facing as a business owner with the current pandemic?
That's a great question. I think one of the biggest things I'm seeing is people's enhanced need to feel safe and to feel secure. My approach in terms of chiropractic and in the realm of healthcare is more of a wellness approach, a proactive as opposed to a reactive. And so one of the things that I'm really getting an opportunity to talk with people about is the state of their current health and how that can be impacted. Right now, obviously it's COVID, it's the coronavirus. But if we're not maintaining ourselves, recognizing and maintaining our health on a regular basis, it could be virtually anything that really could take us down. That's a terrible term, but that could start to beat us down a little bit. And so the struggles have been there in terms of people and finances. That's the thing. Do I have the money to spend on chiropractic care? Do I have the money to spend on fill in the blank? And so helping people recognize what their needs are, and not necessarily what they want. So a struggle has been a financial thing, keeping people coming in the door. But one of the bright spots has been that it's opened up conversation about people pursuing their health and making greater strides to maintain that, and where chiropractic can play a part in that. Hopefully that answered the question for you.
Sure, absolutely. And then Brandon, did you have any additional thoughts as far as the effects of that you've faced with your business? Any changes with your business during the pandemic?
It hasn't been too bad, other than we have to put some thought into things we do. I mean, I do industrial and commercial heating and air. So, in North Carolina in the summer, people will make arrangements for us if they need to, where they're going to have their air conditioned in their building. So it's not been too bad. I have had one customer in particular that, I do a lot of elective work, kind of preventative work for. And they basically said that they're not doing anything that's not an emergency at this point, which had an effect on me. But it's really been something that we just had to adapt to, as far as, wearing masks, being more considerate when we go into a building. I mean, all of my technicians have been told that if we go into a building, one of the first things we need to ask is what requirements do you have of us? I mean, I think it's kind of a given that people are expecting masks, but is there anything else that we need to do different in your facility? So it hasn't been too bad. I mean, it has affected the income, the gross revenues a little bit with at least one customer. We've had another customer that was financially hit hard, so they're not spending as much money with us as they would have. But a little bit of it's been just adapting to the kind of the change in culture that we have now, that we need to adapt to. And I think it's something that every business owner has to do. I mean, this is a pandemic, it's a little bit different, but we all have to be ready and willing to adapt pretty quickly to changes in the culture and the economy and in the way people are spending money. So it's a slightly different problem, but it's something I think we should all be prepared for in one way or another, to adapt at any time that it comes up, something comes up, whether it's a pandemic or, economic problems or anything else.
Absolutely. Thank you. That seems to be the word of the year, Brandon, is adapt, for sure. So we are bumping up on time, and I want to make sure that we're respecting our panelists' time here and wrap up. But before I do, does anyone have any closing thoughts or anything they'd like to say that they didn't have the opportunity to? All right, wonderful. Well, I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you to the entrepreneurs, our audience, for joining us. Thank you to Robbie, Brandon, Thom, Carrie, for helping us out here, for Steve and Dr. Hurst for joining us as well. I really appreciate that. We are going to have this recording available to everyone so that we can publish that as well to go over these questions again, review them, and get this information live. So thank you to everyone who's joined us today. We really appreciate it.